From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
It's a child care problem keeping parents out of the workplace, and it's growing. But is the proposed solution on its way to the governor's desk the right direction? Plus, frustrated parents across Kansas band together as the fight over how to pay for your child's education heats up in Kansas once again. And water is running out, from Lake Cheney to the Ogallala Aquifer, from the ongoing drought to water mining. Could the solution be a drastic change to Kansas farming methods? That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. I'm Pilar Pedraza, and this is Kansas Week. Our state is in a water crisis. Drought is drying up lakes across the state and emptying our aquifers. Parts of Wallace County have seen levels in the Ogallala Aquifer fall 7 feet in just the last year. Overall, the county has lost more than 80% of the water in its corner of the aquifer. It's reached the point where, as the Kansas News Service's Davis Condos shows us, some state lawmakers, after decades of inaction, are considering mandatory limits on irrigation.
Next order of business is House Bill 2279.
The Kansas Water Authority voted for the first time last December that the state should stop draining the aquifer for the sake of agriculture. And now Kansas lawmakers have approved a bill that pushes groundwater districts to reduce water use in their most depleted areas. House Water Committee Chair Jim Minix is a Republican from Scott County, right in the middle of Ogallala country.
We're here today so that we don't become what the Colorado River Valley or Central California looks like. And we here in Kansas have an opportunity to improve our own future right here, and it starts now.
When that bill came up for a vote, it passed overwhelmingly, along with a second bill that would provide millions of dollars for things like helping farmers adopt water-saving technology. Jonathan Aguilar is a Kansas State University water specialist in Garden City. He says getting more efficient irrigation systems into Kansas crop fields buys the state critical time to avoid hitting the aquifer's point of no return.
We are not yet there, but we are headed there if we don't make any changes.
But telling Kansas farmers how much water they can use, that'll never be easy. Stafford County Republican Brett Fairchild is one of 6 House lawmakers who voted against the groundwater legislation. He says people in his part of the state remain skeptical of bills like this one. They worry it'll grease the slippery slope towards state-mandated irrigation cuts.
I didn't think it would be a real popular vote in my district.
And a new K-State survey finds a massive disconnect between how many Ogallala farmers believe depletion is a problem, nearly all of them, and how many believe they have a responsibility to do something about it. That's only around half. Sociologist Matt Sanderson, who worked on the survey, says those percentages haven't changed much since the 1980s.
And that's just part of the report from David Condos with the Kansas News Service. You can find the entire story on their website at hppr.com. Here to address this and other issues facing lawmakers this week, we've got State Senator Ethan Corson, a Fairway Democrat, joining us by Zoom. Welcome, Ethan. And on the desk with me, we have State Representative and Wichita Republican Sandy Pickard. Thank you so much as well. And Sandy, you are a freshman, but you're also on the Water Committee.
Yes.
How much of this did you know ahead of time? And after learning everything that's going on, did that change your mind? What did you think after that?
Well, I grew up in north central Kansas on a farm, so I know a little bit about irrigating and the needs of farmers. And I went to a meeting last year for municipalities, and they were talking about the importance of water to all Kansans, how it really affects agriculture, municipalities, and industry. And if any one of those 3 sectors runs short of water, everybody loses. So, but on the committee this year, we've had so many experts and stakeholders come and tell us about their situation. So I have learned a tremendous amount. And it's a complicated situation, but it's doable. It's not like a done deal and we're out of water yet. So we have to do something now.
There have been some changes, a couple of bills on their way to the governor, but they don't seem to be very drastic ones from the outsider's perspective. They're more about, let's move some money around so we can pay for things, but not really changes in actions at this point.
Well, honestly, the last day in committee when we voted on those 2 bills, we got a standing ovation from the stakeholders that were there. They were that excited. Talk has been going on for about 50 years, and something is actually happening this time. One of the things is there's money, about $50 million, that's going to be used to pay off Milford Lake and let's see here, Perry Lake. Right now, those are managed by the Corps of Engineers, which is on the federal level, and Kansas is paying a lot of interest, so we'll get that taken care of. And then for Western Kansas, the groundwater management districts, or GMDs for short, will be held accountable for what they're doing for planning for conservation and then following through on that plan. So we want the people that are actually using the water to find the ways to cut through technology, through different techniques that they're using, and it's doable. In Northwest Kansas, in Sheridan County, the Lima there,
The Sheridan Six,
yes,
yes.
they're starting their third 5-year cycle. All of the agriculture producers are working together. Everybody has to be participating, and they have decreased their water use by a third, and they're producing more than they ever have. So it can be done. It's taken a while, but yeah, the efforts pay off.
Yeah, I remember speaking with the head of that Lima, and her telling us that with the first time around, they were getting threats from some folks over doing it at all, and by the second time around, those folks were now supporters.
Yeah, and they were so proud to tell their story to the committee. It was just very hopeful. Yeah, and then another part of the bill is monies that will be available for grants for municipalities, from tiny towns to large cities, for their infrastructure for water, for their quality and quantity of water.
Right.
So,
well, and Ethan, I want to bring you in on this discussion as well. And you're not on the water committee. The House has kind of been taking the lead on that, but at the same time, we do know that Eastern Kansas is dealing with some of its own water woes. We had stories out of a couple cities that ran out of water because of rivers running dry.
Well, I think that the two bills that Representative Picker described are some of the best, most positive legislation that we've done this session. I think they were desperately needed. It's really clear to me that the policy of planned depletion of the aquifer was no longer viable, and I'm glad that we were able to bring together a really diverse set of stakeholders to come together on this legislation. The Kansas Farm Bureau, the Kansas Livestock Association, the Nature Conservancy, and this is really much needed. I think that water conservation is really critical to maintaining particularly our quality of life in rural areas. If you think about the importance of maintaining the value of ag land out in rural parts of the state, and then you think about the opportunities for the next generation of farmers to have the same opportunities that their parents had, they need to have water available to them. And so I'm glad that we've taken what I think are going to be some really positive steps in terms of water conservation for the next generation and to preserve the value of our ag land in Kansas.
All right. Well, and we're certainly going to be seeing more on that as the next year or so moves on. Meanwhile, it's a battle for the hearts and minds of Kansas parents as Republican lawmakers and public school advocates face off over how to pay for your child's education. Some frustrated parents say it's time for them to take action. It's an old argument. How much to spend on your child's education in Kansas and where that money should go.
Do I tell collegiate, oh, well, my educational savings fund is going to pay for this?
Well, I'm not sure how you would do it at that poverty level, because you're only going to get your grant award, which wouldn't cover but a fraction of the tuition at collegiate.
This was at a weekend coffee with lawmakers as frustrated public school parents challenged Republican leaders pushing for what they call educational savings accounts, but opponents call vouchers. Then there's a proposal that would freeze currently automatic inflation increases in overall school funding after next school year, a possible violation of the current settlement in the Gannon school funding lawsuit.
We've lived here 8 years, and I felt like I have fought battles for 8 years.
That frustration has boiled over into action for some, like Beth Hollenbeck. Her son has Down syndrome and relies on special education services, but his paras and teachers are constantly changing, something Hollenbeck believes would stop if the state met its financial obligations. She wrote a letter to the editor hoping to spark other parents to speak up too.
We can can ask questions, we can go to our representatives, we can go to our administrators and different people that serve our students and learn and start fighting for what we feel is right.
Other parents across the state are taking action, banding together to form new pro-public education organizations like Educate Butler County, Rice County, and Reno County. They're feeling the same push Judith Deedy and her co-organizers felt when they founded Game On for Kansas Schools more than a decade ago.
Part of the drive for that is just the misinformation that's being put out there, that it's just a constant effort to try to make sure people hear what it really means.
She points to the use of test scores as a way to say Kansas kids are still struggling, something Representative Christy Williams used last weekend at that legislative coffee to push for looking to new funding ideas, since she says old ones aren't working.
Because we know right now that in Kansas we rank 42nd in 8th grade reading, and that's national. Everybody went through COVID and we continue to go down.
But these parents say their schools just need some time to recover from a decade of underfunding, followed by a devastating pandemic. The question is, which one of them will win enough votes to come out on top? Meanwhile, the governor took to the road this last week to lobby for her education funding proposals during visits to 4 different western Kansas school districts. So, does this feel like deja vu all over again? A lot of public education advocates, at least that I've spoken with, have said so. Ethan, I'm going to start with you. You've been in the State House for a little bit longer. Do you feel like you've heard this fight before? And where does it go from here, since a lot of parents thought this was settled already?
You know, I think it's a shame, but it seems like every single year we have to relitigate the issue of whether we should properly fund our public schools, which to me is such a no-brainer, because that has really been the lifeblood of our economic development, of bringing in businesses and jobs into Kansas, has been our strong public school system. That's the reason so many people moved here, was because of our public school system and wanting to send their kids to that public school system. I will say my constituents have been really clear with me that they do not want to see their public tax dollars going to private schools. They want to see those public dollars used for our public schools in our community. So I'm a strong supporter of funding public education. I don't want to see us back in the courts again. I want to see K-12 fully funded under the Gannon decision. And I also want to see, as your piece touched on, us on a path to full funding of special education, which is so critical to getting services to our kids who we have a moral and a legal obligation to provide those services to.
And Sandy, you're a little bit newer to the legislature,
Yes.
but are you hearing from your constituents on this, and what are you hearing from them?
I'm hearing both sides. School choice is something that some parents want, many parents want. For my own situation, I sent my daughter to a private school. She was born with a severe facial deformity. She had a trach until she was almost 12. Intellectually, she was great. But I didn't want her to be bullied. I wanted her to be surrounded by a smaller classroom where she felt very loved and cared for. And that was a great choice for her. She excelled. So to have that choice, I paid for it. I was a single mom. It was a struggle, but we made it through. So I understand that viewpoint. And not all children flourish the best in public schools. Now, I want to say that this week I spent about an hour and a half in 2 schools, 2 elementary schools in my district, and I was very impressed. They had all kinds of students. They have all kinds of programs to meet needs. I was just very impressed and thrilled, actually, to see what was going on there. So I think if we can do it right, we can meet both needs, you know, the parent choice and the public school funding. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of creative work, and I'm not an expert in that yet, but yeah, that's
Still
how I
figuring
see
it out.
Yeah, that's
All
right.
right. Well, there are other issues that Kansas needs to solve, and one of them has to do with a shortage of childcare slots, some 85,000 just to take care of the kids in the state right now. One proposed solution is on its way to the governor's desk, but it's a question mark if she'll sign it. Meanwhile, as KSN's Alexis Padilla shows us, daycare providers are still struggling to find enough workers to watch over the kids they have.
Had a lot of teachers working from 6 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, including a lot of my managers.
A necessity to keep Peachwood Early Learning Center in Hayesville up and running.
In the last month and a half, I've lost 5 employees.
The low wages for childcare workers versus the high cost of living creates a challenge for the industry.
Some really good teachers be here and they're like, I can't pay my bills on this, and so they go find work other places.
Founder Shelley Palmer says she's tried raising wages.
Even that isn't enough, because I still can't get anybody to come work for that.
Higher wages going back on the parents.
Another $50 a week, on addition to what they're already paying, which takes them into the $310 to $360 a week.
It's an issue being felt statewide.
We have 10 Head Start locations throughout our organization, and all 10 of them we have closure in our classrooms because we just can't hire staff.
The shortage limiting the number of openings.
You have to have staff members in order to accept kids, and there is such a need for childcare in Kansas and Wichita, and when we don't have the staff, we have to turn kids away.
And we have a wait list of over 200 kids.
Childcare workers doing what they can while hoping for a solution.
It's not going to happen overnight, but if we can pay them more, and while we appreciate the ARPA funding and all of that, they're Band-Aids.
Band-Aids, and that's what some are calling the bill that's on its way to the governor right now. And I'm going to kind of start with you. This was a Senate-led initiative, the bill that is on its way to the governor, but I'm wondering if there are other ideas that are kind of rattling around the State House that you may be hearing about, because there's a big question mark if the governor is going to sign this bill.
I attended some meetings at the Capitol during our session from different people that are affiliated with the Kansas Children's Cabinet. And there are projects around the state in smaller towns and some of the bigger cities to be creative to provide child care. I know, and I can't remember which of the small towns they talked about, but different businesses as well as the child care the business the owner worked together with and government, city government. I mean, they were all working together to provide the child care so workers in town could go to work, So being creative like that is a great possibility.
Yeah, I know I've talked with folks in Leota where they started a nonprofit organization made up of folks around the community so that they built their own daycare center.
Right.
And, that's one solution out there. Another one, one county, I think it was Kiowa County, if I remember correctly, they developed the building and then they're renting space out in that building to daycare providers, kind of like a shared space daycare center.
Right.
So that, because a lot of the regulations on the facilities are one of the things that a lot of folks struggle with.
Well, and I was going to say, I read that bill today, and some of the numbers restrictions have been relaxed a little bit. I mean, the bill clearly states if you have an infant, how many infants you can have in a home, and total numbers of children, and I mean, so that workers can be taking care of more children, more money would be coming in, so hopefully it would be a win-win situation.
Yeah, and Ethan, I'm going to come to you on this. That changed some of those specific numbers or some of the concerns that I heard coming from opposition. The age range is as young as 14-year-olds being allowed to work in daycare centers, more infants per worker being allowed. Those were things that I've heard some child care advocates saying are not good ideas.
Well, I spoke out against this bill on the Senate floor, and this is a bad bill, and I would go as far to say that I think, frankly, this is a dangerous bill that does nothing to address the underlying issues causing our challenges with childcare. This bill really is about, as you mentioned, cramming more kids into a smaller space with younger, less qualified, less well-trained staff. We've got a young child in daycare. That's not what my wife and I want. That's not what my constituents want. This bill does nothing to improve child safety. This bill does nothing to make sure our kids are getting a good start with their education so they're ready for kindergarten. This bill does nothing to increase our ability to attract more workers into this field so we can actually address the worker shortage piece of this. It does nothing to improve affordability of childcare so more families who want to send their kids to daycare can actually afford to do so. So there are just really dangerous pieces of this bill, and then there are glaring omissions in this bill that I think make it really, really not the direction that we need to go as a state. The governor has a task force on early childhood. They are working on addressing this issue in a comprehensive way. We need to wait for the results of that before we dive into something like this that's really going to put us in a dangerous situation in the years ahead.
All right, we're going to move on to our next up, also dealing with kids, and this time mental health. Coming to South Central Kansas for youth struggling with mental health problems, there's a new idea. As Cake's Mae Vashbrook shows us, 75% of mental health problems actually began before the age of 24. And there's a new program coming to town that aims to change all that.
75% of adult mental illness starts before the age of 24, 50% before the age of 14. So we're really having a big impact.
When Dr. Cassie Carlson came to KU Med in Wichita a year ago,
I know how long those things take. So I figured we were in for a several-year, program development phase.
Today, she's putting the finishing touches on the school's plan to implement a child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship with Dr. Rachel Brown.
Something on defenses, which comes up a lot.
It's received enough funding to officially start accepting students.
I've worked in 5 states and 2 countries. I have never worked anywhere where there were enough child and adolescent psychiatrists.
Brown says Kansas only has 60 child and adolescent psychiatrists, including herself, right now. We need over 400 more to best help kids suffering from mental illness.
Our hope and expectation is that many of them will stay with us in our community, that they'll go on to provide care for patients throughout their professional career, seeing hundreds and thousands of children and their families.
The new program will take in 2 fellows per class who are already doctors.
They'll see patients, a lot of patients, and we'll supervise them.
It's the first step in Brown's plan to chip away at our shortage.
Their mental health problems interferes with their ability to do the things that they should be doing at that age. Their grades fall, their social relationships suffer. And we can help them be more functional, meet the milestones that they need to meet, and that they can therefore be more likely to do things like graduate high school, become employable.
And Ethan, I'm going to start with you on this one. As we look at this, I know that the legislature has been looking at mental health issues for the last few years now, especially as we deal with increasing problems and the tie for mental health problems to drug addiction, homelessness, and many of the other issues that as a society we deal with. This is not necessarily in your area, your district, but it is one idea to kind of maybe stop the problems before they start.
Well, I think this is an incredibly exciting program, not just for the Wichita area, but really for the entire state of Kansas. I think this could be a big win for us, and I'm really glad to see what can come out of this in the years ahead. As you pointed out in your piece, we know that we have this immense need for children and adult psychiatrists. We've got about 60, we need 400. This is a great way for us to start chipping away at that problem and really addressing this. And I know that the research shows that if we can intervene with these children and these adolescents early on, that they're going to have much better outcomes throughout the rest of their life. So I think this is an exciting program for every Kansan.
And Sandy, you're a former nurse. As you look at this, what changes do you think something like this could do for Wichita area?
Oh, definitely. We need more mental health providers across the state. I've been to some workshops since I've been in the House, and it's amazing the shortages in western Kansas, eastern Kansas, everywhere. And, people are desperate. And there's the Juvenile Justice and Corrections Committee. We had a joint meeting with them, and I'm on the Child Welfare and Foster Care Committee. And they were talking about behavioral interventional centers that we have the funding in Kansas. We need those desperately because there are so many teenagers that are acting out. They're abusive at home, they're disruptive at school, they're causing chaos throughout the community, and right now they can't really impose consequences on them. So we desperately need not just the psychiatrists, but all mental health workers to be able to staff those facilities. Yeah.
All right. Well, finally today, one of many projects funded in this year's budget could make a huge difference for the physical health of South Central Kansas and the financial health of downtown Wichita. KAKE's Jackson Overstreet takes a look at the impact a Wichita State KU Med partnership may soon have.
This is going to be something that it'll be a school, it'll be students, it'll be housing, it'll be activity, further advanced, so it's good stuff.
It's going to get very different healthcare workers in different fields together in the same building.
They're talking about a proposed Wichita State and KU biomedical school. The project would house KU School of Medicine and Wichita State's health programs at a single site in downtown Wichita.
One of the most transformational buildings in this city that will change healthcare for the future in this city.
The project has an estimated cost of $300 million. A big price tag, but one that the Kansas legislature is going to help with. It has set aside $142 million in federal COVID funds in this year's budget to help cover that.
If we didn't have the state support of a substantial amount like they've allocated, it would be a non-starter.
The project is in its early design stages, but Wichita State President Rick Muma says having the support from the legislature helps keep the momentum going, which is important for a project of this scope because of just how much it would change Wichita and Sedgwick County if it is completed.
It will further expand what we've done with, the DO school, and now Nietzsche with that school there. I mean, it's going to create a downtown environment that lasts generations.
And I'm going to start with you, Sandy. What was it that you think convinced lawmakers to spend that one-time money on this project instead of something else?
It's really innovative, bringing together all these different specialties, physicians, nursing students, pharmacy students, and other healthcare professionals, and they'll be working, living, and studying all in the same area, which some of them will probably marry. They'll want to, stay in Kansas. That's the idea.
All right.
Yeah.
And Ethan, I want to ask you that same question. What do you think it was that convinced lawmakers to spend the money on this project?
Well, I think it's projects like this that are exactly what we need to be doing to grow our state. I'm thrilled to see the legislature supporting this project. I think this could be really transformative, not just for Wichita, but for that whole South Central region. When you talk about having a thriving new healthcare corridor, the research, the technology, the education, and the healthcare delivery all really centralized in one state-of-the-art facility. It's things like that that are going to help us continue to grow Kansas.
All right, Ethan, I hate to interrupt you, but we are out of time. Thank you again, Ethan and Sandy, both for joining us. We'd also like to thank our news partners at KSN News, the Wichita Eagle, and KAKE News for sharing their materials with us. For now, stay safe and have a great week.